Let's start by just sort of introducing ourselves as best we can. Is there a view of the whole?
This is about, that's the view of the whole thing right
Yeah,
there.
okay.
And it will, when people go around the room, it will go forward, it will try to focus on.
Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time doing this, but I think it's kind of nice to know what folks are expecting. Let's start over here.
Hi, my name is Trish Curran.
Hi, Trish.
I'm interested in it.
Great. Are you new?
I am.
Yeah, not just the course. Is birding this your first big birding experience?
I live in a place where there's lots of birds.
Okay.
I see birds quite frequently, but it would be nice to know what I'm seeing.
There you go. Look at all. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Next.
Martha?
Oh, I'm Martha Russell, and this is the second. I took part 2 of birding last year. It was a lot of fun. I really had a great time. So now it's part 1, and I wish I could say I remember a lot of the stuff. But I can never find birds at all. But the rest of the class was so helpful and helped me spot things. So.
Peggy.
I'm Peggy Ford, and I just like you. So that's why I'm here, and I like everybody.
Morning. Since you took the course last spring, it's going to be cool with this. Camille?
Ditto. I'm
Good to see you.
Camille Woodbury, and I've lived in the area for a long time in Tillman, and now I'm living in Easton. And in Tillman, I used to see a lot of birds and do a lot of birding with birding. Here, not so much birding unless I go out with the group. So I really enjoy doing that.
Great to have you back.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Donna Holmes,
Donna.
and I did take a birding class a few years ago, I think. And I've recently been birding a little bit with Mary. I enjoy being outdoors and trying to identify, but again, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, we'll fix that. Be careful working with Mary. She attracts butterflies. Susie.
I'm Susie Pratt, and I like me too. I'm a groupie, a winning groupie too, but also, like you, it's good to come back again and just, you learn it and it drops out. And you come back and learn some more.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll rub it in eventually. Mary?
Yeah, Mary Carpenter. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've taken classes with you, and I learned a little bit more, and I remember a little bit more each time. So repetition is really the key. Yeah.
That's funny. For me, it's just the opposite. Jeff.
I'm Jeff. I'm from Easton. I haven't taken one of your formal classes, but you've been along on a couple events. Most recently, I think it was in Wycomico County. We hiked back to that big cypress tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. We're going to try to repeat that this May. Yeah. Okay. And
I'm Cindy. This is my first birding class ever. I love birds, love to listen to them, haven't any idea about birds whatsoever. So I tried to sign up for this class twice before, missed out both times. So this time I set my alarm. It registered but as soon as I could, so I got it.
I got you.
Liz said it was spelled in 15 minutes.
Yes, I believe
I'm
it.
surprised.
I want to make sure that
Wayne's definitely got movies.
It's like 7 or 5.
And online we have Patricia.
Yes, Patricia Kurtz, Trisha. It's my first birding class, and I've always been into loving birds, especially backyard birds, because that's what I had around where I lived. We're part-time residents in St. Mike's, but we're moving full-time in about a year. So I just want to learn all about the birds and the ducks and anything alive, living. And it's just okay.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. Welcome to the community too.
Thank you.
Kevin. Yeah.
Well, I am a super groupie for Wayne. So the rest of you, forget about it. And getting into Wayne's class is like getting Taylor Swift tickets. We're all very lucky. So looking forward to it. And like Peggy, I don't know if this is the 5th, 6th, or 7th time, but it's fantastic every time. I look forward to it.
Well, it's great to have you all here. Swifts will start arriving in May, so. Let's see if we can, maybe earlier. Anyway, that's great. I have a loose affiliation with Washington College. I was former director for the Center for Environmental Society up there, retired back in 2006. Good gosh, there was still dinosaurs. Would sweep off the porch then. But I met the new director and we're able to keep this relationship going. And so in a sense, this is a collaboration between the college and Chesapeake Forum, which I love dearly. So I'm glad to be here. It's amazing and in a sense daunting to realize how popular the course has been, but the credit goes to the birds. And hopefully we'll find a bunch of them this time coming up. I'm going to do a PowerPoint kind of introduction to the course itself. And then we'll eventually wind up going to the ProHealth website and look at a few resources that are available to birders and talk a little bit more about the course itself. And then as time allows, we'll look at some of the classes in waterfowl that we have. I assume everybody's able to hear me and see me. We're going to share the screen with a PowerPoint here if I can figure out how to do it. I already are. So, yeah, but from here, I need to, because it's already started, I've got to find the PowerPoint itself.
That's up, I think it's already up. So it's only all we're gonna do is click the button.
Well, resume slideshow. I tried that, it didn't do it. Meaning it's already up somewhere. Let's try here. There it is. Here it is. All right, we should be okay.
And then we can use this.
Yes. Okay. So let's start by seeing some of you guys who have been in here before can identify these fellows. Who's that? Anybody?
Now.
That's a mallard. Hey, way to go. How about this one?
It's weird.
So it's like Bill.
Anybody?
Shovel.
Shoveler. Northern shoveler. Yes, this is a
Excuse
glorified.
me, Wayne. So the ducks aren't showing up on my screen, just a little part at the bottom of the ducks.
Same here.
All right, we'll fix it.
Okay.
Start sharing again. Stop it.
Stop sharing.
Once I find my mouse. Yeah, disappearing mouse. Here. Oh, that worked.
Now, can you see it now?
No,
There's a square.
that's the very bottom of it.
Oh, that's
There's the
because.
mouse. Okay,
So
stop
we need
sharing.
to move the camera needs to be angled up.
Sure.
That's not the camera. It's this, yeah, stop sharing.
All right, and then we'll go back and try again. And, PowerPoint.
See, you got it.
Yes. Okay. That one,
I think it's that.
let's see.
Share.
There it should-
It's over. We should open it.
Yay.
Okay, good.
Now you're gonna have. Good reaction. Can you click on that green part? Okay, put that as, because that's.
All right. Okay, third. So we had a mallard going across the top, a mallard, a northern shoveler. These are all birds we will see. Look at the bill on that guy. It's a duck bill on steroids. And the northern pintails, several people shouted out, okay. I can get the next one.
Did you just do something?
No, that was me.
It'll just meant.
Now it won't, now it won't register. How do you like that? There it is. Okay, now we're. There's some delays in doing this. How about this one, gang? Remember the old name?
Something.
Oh, yes.
Bald, no.
Old,
Bald pig.
Used to be ball pig, right? Now it's American widgeon. Widgeon, okay? We have a Eurasian widgeon down in Ocean City, and with a little luck, we're gonna see it. Okay, how about this dude? because of this thing. I wonder if I can just.
Stop.
Yeah, we went into percent.
Fuel slides.
It's showing.
I dream. Okay, now.
San
Sorry, we'll share it again. We'll get it. Should be this one. These newfangled things like to pick which screen you're using. We've got a whole bunch of them here. That'll go.
Okay.
All right, how about this guy in the No, bigger. No, it's a diving duck.
See them in Tillman?
Yes.
Good.
This is the A letter.
That made my vow.
The four-letter abbreviation is SUSC.
Southern School, Southern Stoner.
Surf scope, right on, okay? They're pretty common in the bay right now, so hopefully we'll have a chance to see those. Although you have to sometimes get away from the shore. Come on, let's go.
That's a sea duck.
That is a sea duck or diving. We'll go through that class pretty soon. Okay. Bufflehead, right? Smaller, duck smaller than a mallard, very common. How about this? This is the, I'm sorry about the bar. Canvasback, that is probably Chesapeake Bay's most famous wintering waterfowl. Okay, and, about that, handsome.
Oh, yeah. Good in Merganser.
Yes, it's a merganser. You can tell by the very thin bill. It's not a broad duck-like bill. They feed on fish. And this is the hooded merganser. And then we got one more. This little dude.
Yeah.
Is that already?
Duddy rug. Yes, it's a duddy rug. Running duck, right, member of the stiff tail group. I'm allowed to look at that. Several of these we're going to see on our field trip on Monday, so we'll have a good chance to see it. I've tried to pick the plumages that are most likely to spot during the early spring, late winter. And so that's a winter plumage ruddy duck. It has, in fact, quite ruddy, the male at least, come breeding season. Okay. So here we splash into the course itself. And as I say, it's a collaboration here. I don't know whether I move that bar any further away or not.
You could pull it down more if you click on the green. That's your,
And click on the green.
yeah, that's your superpower.
Don't want to go any further.
You go down.
Could you maybe?
Made it littler.
It's then
with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see where it gets in the way.
And then close
And
that,
I'll move it around.
you need to close that,
I don't think it closes.
Chromebook, the Chromebook thing, close that.
No, it's not showing on his computer.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
So he should,
Unless there's more.
his,
Can you slide over to, like drag your cursor off the screen over to the right, and let me see if it shows it. Okay, so now you're up on the screen, and I go up and say aloud.
I don't have that here.
No, it's not, there you go.
Okay. Well, we'll live with it. All righty, for the time being, gets in the way, I'll move it around. Let's see if I can get the control back here.
Oh. Bring your mouse back, bring it, it's over here.
There.
Yeah, that's weird.
There it is. So here's the course schedule, and if you did not get it in the email, let me know. We'll stick that up top.
it's on your course page on the website though, too.
Yes, it's also there. I have a few extra copies here if anybody would like to take one with them. Let's just go through it fairly quickly. We have 2 Zoom classes. I think the first one's today sometime. The next one is in February. My wife and I are going to Vietnam, and that's why I've compressed this course a bit. So we'll be gone in March, part of March. And then we'll resume with the spring term course. And looking at bird migration. Our field trips are 5. The ones in red are basically day long, or at least will take up most of your day. We're going down to the Cambridge waterfront on Monday. Right now, the weather looks fairly favorable, a bit chilly, maybe around freezing in the morning, but the wind's kind of from the southwest. So I think we'll probably not have a lot of trouble with that. Oakley Street, if you've never been there before, is fantastic. If you like to take pictures, this is a good place to get up and close with 5 or 6 species of waterfowl, both diving and dabbling. And as time allows down there, we'll also look at a couple of other locations, maybe see a few gulls and maybe some other ducks. I understand that they had one, I think it was Saturday. They did a trip down there. I had to leave early, but they did a trip down there and got a male harlequin duck. Long look at it. That's phenomenal. We usually only get that in Ocean City. And the only harlequins I've heard of until this one have been females. So that would be cool as a moose if we could do that. These trips typically are over by 11. We get you back here well before lunch. We will then try, this will be a bit of a reach, but we'll try the open bay off Tillman Island and see what we can see there. That often produces our scoters and some other buck ducks fairly close. I'll try to scout that ahead of time so we don't waste a lot of time with it. Who knows what the weather will be.
Make sure you write down his cell phone number up there.
Yeah, get the number in the email if you don't have it.
Connected in the.
On the 5th of February, we're going to go to the coast and look at Ocean City Inlet and also 3 or 4 other spots there. There's a colony of black crowned night herons there that are back this year so far. There's a rare duck at one of the local ponds. And then on the way home, we stopped by Berlin, Maryland, and they have a old chicken refinery dump there, basically. There's now a bunch of reclaimed wetlands, and that place gets loaded with ducks. So we'll be touring that. We're starting a little bit early from here. If you're leaving from Easton, you need to leave by 6:30. I'll meet you all there, and I have a little something to entice you even further than the birds or my good looks, and that has to do with I'm going to start something that I resume something that we used to do with the Talbot Bird Club pre-COVID. We're going to have warm soup in our condo in 76th Street. So you bring your lunch, but I will have soup at the ready and some drinks, and we can warm up if we really need to get warm around lunchtime. So be our guests, weather permitting, of course, with all of us.
Which one is that? Number 3?
That's number 3.
Weather.
And every field trip, and I'll be doing that this evening, I will have a preliminary bit of information about it, so I'll have more details.
Well, you will notice too that when we send out the memos, there'll be a link to our Google Drive, which all the handouts will be in that. So as we get those, we'll put them in the Google Drive. So if for some reason you lose your email with the information, you can go back to that.
Great. So I'll probably meet you there since I'll be getting the place ready. On Monday, we go back to Pickering Creek. And that's a great place to get some good looks at hood and merganser. We may have to crawl over some vegetation to best look at the pond. We'll do it as necessary. Usually I scout these ahead of time, so won't be quite sort of feeling around. And then we will go down to Blackwater to wrap it up for an all-day trip down to Blackwater, the Wildlife Drive, and looking. There's tons of snow geese and things like that down there. Who knows what else? And maybe pick up some smaller perching birds as well. So that's what goes on.
So Wayne, on all these 8 o'clocks, like the first one, we're gonna meet you in Cambridge at 8 a.m.?
I'll explain that. I think for this Monday, just to plan ahead, I'm going to probably meet you all at Sailwinds Park
Okay.
at 8 o'clock. That's the big sail as you cross over the first right turn from Burning Right until you come to the parking area. Some of these, it's very useful if you carpool, and with everyone's permission, if anybody has a problem, let me know. But with everyone's permission, I will send out the course roster once, and that'll be perhaps as a prelude to the Cambridge trip. If you'd like to carpool, to either email or generally they're all email addresses. If you'd like to email and try to work up somebody to go with, that would be fine. In a couple of cases, I'll be leaving from here, and I can take a couple. But But I think in this case, I'll meet you all at Oakley Street. It's not a long reach, not very far, and we can carpool from there because parking in parts of Cambridge is kind of limited.
Are we, last class, we had a meeting spot over there by the Acme, is that?
Yes.
Is that?
And that's a good grounding place. If you're leaving from Easton, St. Michael's, any place convenient to Marlborough Road, where the Tread Avalon Shopping Center is behind the Acme parking lot, that's where the Bird Club typically runs. Once in a while, I'll be there, but again, I'll let everybody know ahead of time. And as Lynn says, you can get the GPS locations.
Trina and I just figured out that probably the simplest thing is we're going to put a link to the handouts on our website page. So if you lose track of something, you can just go back onto the Chesapeake Forum page, go to the course for birds and birding. And in that, there'll be a link that you can click on to get to the handout page and pick whichever you need.
And also, unless we have a problem with this, I'm trying to get our email set up with the college for two-factor sign-in. I'm doing that tomorrow. But you email me at that address anytime. I do check that fairly regularly. My wife and I share the same email address, so if something comes across that's important, she can flag me for it. You can also cell phone, call me, or text, or whatever works. So if you have any troubles at all, or if you get lost, or something like that, we should be able to keep in touch. And so far, everybody I know that has taken the course has returned. Oh, I may have missed a few.
I'll add one more thing. On the calendar that we have on the Chesapeake Forum website, I've got the birding field trips in there, and I've got the location, so it'll take you directly. If you use Google Maps, it'll take you right to it, and you can get directions. Like that.
Unless there's a change in what you're doing.
Yeah,
Right.
and unless the weather interferes.
Right.
It's
It's based on
basically
this
rain or shine, but if it's really stormy, we'll postpone or do something. I will attempt to put all the trips in. We'll get them in somehow. Once in a while, I may have to move the date, we can't make it. Yeah, but we'll cross our fingers. But if it's cold and windy at Ocean City Inlet, well, it's the way it goes. Okay, let's come along, my friend.
He's up.
There it goes. I have to wake it up. There's bad news and there's good news. And the bad news has to do with this paper. And by the way, if you get the Washington Post or get the 7 from them or anything like that, there was an article just came out a couple of days ago. I would afford it, but I think you have to be signed in to be able to read it. But it's a description of this paper, actually, in many ways, in a more layman's terms, talking about the decline of North American birds. In the last roughly 50 years, since 1970, we have lost approximately 3 billion birds from our North American population across all kinds. That works out to about a third of the abundance of birds in 1970. So if you're actually seeing and feel you're not seeing as many birds nowadays, that's probably true. Slapped on top of that, feeder counts seem to be down this year, and we think that's due to the fact that there's been a warm enough December and a warm enough fall that forage is available for a lot of the birds that would normally come to food. When a bird comes to a feeder, it's exposed, and so they're not necessarily well protected, and so they do so reluctantly. So if there are fewer of them anyway, and there's fewer coming because there's more stuff in the bushes, they'll be doing that. Our Christmas bird count was actually up a little bit from last year in terms of numbers of individuals. So as far as we know, we aren't seeing a rampant decline due to fewer at the feeders this year. But since 1970, it's a different story. This is a serious thing. The causes go everywhere from too many cats, although I don't think that's a big contributor in this case, but habitat loss and possibly pesticides and some other things that we need to correct what we're doing. Any rate, that's happening. And a slide showing, there it is, slide showing this sort of gives a summary of that particular paper. The authors, by the way, are well-known bird types and bird researchers from across the country. The data they were using are some that we may be contributing to, the eBird database, the Christmas bird counts, the North American Breeding Bird Survey, and a whole bunch of other sources, including radar, looking at flocks of birds flying across the Gulf of Mexico. All of that came together for this bad news. For this course, there's some good news. Wetland birds, which would include our waterfowl for the most part, increased. All the other classes, they separated these into biomes. All the other classes have decreased in various biomes, but the wetlands have increased. And when we get to our last session after the course, we'll be talking about conservation efforts that brought that about. And those efforts have insights into how we might approach bird conservation in general, not just for water. But that's the good news. Even so, the Chesapeake Bay is not overflowing with ducks as it used to be in the 60s and 70s. And here's something to entice you to just come here often. Birds are linked to happiness levels, so everybody here better be smiling. And not only this is a study that was done in Europe, but not only that, but the happiness level has to be, one conclusion they had from this quote from the paper, being around 14 additional bird species provide as much satisfaction as earning an additional $150 a month. So if you think this course is expensive, just remember that you're making probably at least $70 a day. Well, they don't pay me enough. But whether that's really true or not, I don't know. But as you will find out, I love doing this. I love doing the birds. I like being around folks that enjoy doing that. And so you can't prove it wrong by me. Okay, let's talk a bit, especially for you new folks, about binoculars and what that means. It's sometimes a daunting experience to have to go out and buy a pair. A lot of people inherit them from grandparents and parents, and the qualities vary, and so does the cost. You can spend somewhere between $50 and $3,000 for a pair of binoculars. It is an investment, and the better the optics, the better your birding is going to be, the more enjoyable it will be, and the happier you'll be. So, all those words. What used to be called standard binoculars are actually designed with what's called a poro prism. And these are the binoculars you see in old movies, and perhaps you've actually inherited or been able to pick up a pair somewhere. They have the wider separation of the business end, the ocular end, and the way the light passes through them is different. Most birders nowadays are using what sometimes are marketed as compact binoculars. I'm a little careful about that because some compact binoculars are nothing more than opera glasses. But they have a prism system inside called roof prism. Prisms are used to invert the image so that you have right to left. If you look through an astronomical telescope and move it to the right, the image will move to the left. But so these prisms correct that. They're made usually of high quality glass, often coated with various things that will prevent, allow the light rays to pass as a group instead of being, if you will, filtered out like a prism does make a rainbow. Poro prisms, the light is basically passes in and moves to right angles and then into your eye, the ocular end. In a roof prism, the light is still bent, but it is, the design of the roof prism is such that you can keep the barrel of the binocular straight. As I said, it's hard to find poro prism today. They have a couple of advantages. Typically, the image is a little bit brighter, maybe not necessarily noticeably so, but there are some birders, especially old timers, who prefer them. Roof prism, on the other hand, typically has a sharper image. They're a little heavier. But if you were out on the market buying binoculars, that's probably the ones that you would get. You'll see when binoculars are on sale somewhere, certain things like 8x42 or 10x42 or something like that. The 42 refers to the diameter of the ocular, I'm sorry, the business end, the optical end, and basically it reflects the light gathering out. So what you would want to have, most birders get 7 or 8 or 10 power, and all of them have 42 as the business end itself. Yes, that does show this. There you go. So it's this end here. That gathers the light. The higher the power, the less light you actually can see. But if you start to go above 42 millimeters, you begin to get into some fairly bulky binoculars that are very, very heavy and not necessarily that good. I am using 10 by 42s. I still drink coffee, and the result is I'm not holding them as steady as I used to, and I'm not getting any better at it. But for those who are beginning, I think you'd be very happy with 8 by 42s. These are good enough to see waterfowl at reasonable distances, but also really good for songbirds and things that are going to be closer to you. And the field of view is typically a little bit wider, so that if the bird hops from a branch to another branch, you may be able to follow it. It's harder to do that with 10 by 40. The extra power does allow you to see a little bit more detail, but I'm stressing an awful lot the behavior of the birds, and so whether you need that or not. Here's a classic pair that we used for the youth program of the Ornithological Society. And these, unfortunately, the sort is now defunct. Eagle Optics went under 20 years ago. But Eagle Optics used to make a very good brand name binocular. This is a 8 by 42. It looks pretty familiar to those of you. You see it? All right. If you're an eyeglass wearer, don't worry. If you're wearing glasses, these eyepieces screw in, and you can put it right up against your glasses like this. It's a good idea, perhaps, not to have bifocals, but it can be done. If you're not an eyeglass wearer, you screw these out like this. That gives you an appropriate distance for the exit pupils so that you can see. If you're wearing glasses and for some reason hang it down, you can either quickly adjust or you can get away with just looking at the tablet. It works pretty well. Field of view is sometimes specified. The numbers I've seen is something greater than 350 feet. That's a fairly wide view. At 1,000 yards, you're not going to be looking at anything at 1,000 yards, but it gives you something to compare. It is important you be able to close focus somewhere around 15 feet, 12 to 15 feet or 17 feet, somewhere in that. If you can't focus any closer without the image being blurred, you're going to miss a lot of songbirds detail. So that's important to make sure that they have close focus. There's the costs, and a little bit about use, and then I'll give you, I'm not selling binoculars, but I can give you one, what looks like a good deal based on what Cornell has reviewed. But to use binoculars, make sure on the camera, you see the bird over in that window or something like that. It's a nice idea to see if there's something in the background or some twig or some limb or whatever, or if you're looking at waterfowl, something in the background that you can catch. And then you bring your binoculars, keep your eyes on it, don't look down, bring the binoculars up to your eyes and try to catch that piece of background, and you'll probably be able to find the bird.
Just take practice.
Yes, it does take practice. It's not, and a lot of people try to do it too quick, and the tendency is to look down. My binoculars are here, and then they're low. They'll be there. And so practice it a bit. With waterfowl, that skill is a little less necessary, but because the distances will be looking. But it's good to get in practice with that. I still occasionally make mistakes. And sometimes I forget to look at the background. If it's a really good bird, I forget to look at the background and see where I'm looking at. And then I got to find it again. Since I have 10x binoculars, the margin for error is not very great. I was looking last night at what might be available, and you can get these on Amazon. And so if you're interested in buying a pair, they're Cornell folks who run eBird and everything else set up, did a review of the top binoculars for a decent price. And they came up with the best one, and this one listed Amazon for $329. And you can probably get it cheaper than that. It's Celestron, Celestron, Trail Seeker ED, and it's an 8 by 42. You may be able to find it on sale elsewhere. but it is available on Amazon. And that was one that they've recommended for the price. Do expect to spend a couple of $100. I bought a pair of Celestrons, not this one, but a pair of 8x42 Celestrons for my daughter last Christmas and a year ago. And I only had to pay $100 on Amazon. They're very good. Got them before I gave them away. But anyway, that's one that's been reviewed by Cornell and was, for the price, one of their top choices. Depending on your eyes, whether it's worth investing hundreds and hundreds of dollars, or even 1,000 or so, is really your choice. If you're going to go that high, though, check them out first. Actually, get a hold of a pair, buy it from a place where you can return it, whatever works, but try it out. Probably the best place that I know of, and this is just me, is up in Cape May at the Cape May Bird Observatory. They have lots of binocular scopes. It's worth a trip up there. Plus, it's a great birding spot. So it all works out. Okay. I have a pair or two. If you want to try out some binoculars that are 8x40, I have a pair of 10s that are good birding quality. And if you would like to try them on one of our trips, I'd be glad to loan them to you. I usually bring them along anyway. So you have a chance to try out, see what you would like to do. For waterfowl, we often use spotting scopes. If you've been in the course before and have invested in one, bring it along. We can share that. I'll have two, one of which is set up to do digiscope pictures, which you can see. And the other is strictly be passed around, basically. Waterfowl are nice and big, but they're not always nice and close. Oakley Street being one exception. In terms of resources and bird guides, when I first started this course about 6 years ago, we were recommending that people buy Peterson's Field Guide in its most recent edition. Roger Torrey Peterson is very famous in the birding community because he started back in the 30s to identify birds using field marks. And his guide slowly evolved to show pictures that he usually painted, showing the birds with arrows or lines pointing to the key field marks. And then he would have text on the opposite page or below, depending on how it went. That still is an approach that lots of people use, and you'll even hear me using it, and you'll learn to use it too for some things. For example, looking at the mallard, the green head is helpful. Looking at the black duck, the arrow points to the very dark body, which looks superficially like a female mallard, and so on. Those are really useful, but as birding has matured, if you will, we have a variety of other guides that are out there, some of which are based on photographs. I'm a little leery of just photographs showing the bird in one pose, because the artists, the people are going to pick the pose that looks best, and it isn't going to necessarily be what you really see. And so photographed bird guides are not necessarily the be-all and end-all, although in some ways some people feel they provide more detail than artist paintings. But artist paintings don't have to be the real bird. They can exaggerate certain features that are useful. One is combine some of this together is Richard Crossley, and he has what he calls the ID guides, and he's done several. One for Britain, he's done one for Eastern birds, one for Western birds, which was published just last year, and he's actually done one for waterfowl, which these are not things you're going to put in your back pocket. But they're a wonderful resource to take in the car or on a trip, and you can refer to them. Crossley's waterfowl book is amazing because he has lots of plates of all the different waterfowls. And what he does, as this one on the pintail shows, he'll have an up-close and personal look. These are all based on photographs, but they've all been photoshopped. He has an up-close and personal look at the bird as it might appear in a typical field guide. But then he's made good use of all the junk pictures that he gets over the years, and he's shown birds in various depths and distances, and in various poses and in various kinds of behavior. And so you get the bird in its habitat in views that you might really see. And those are incredibly useful. It's more than that. He's actually worked with some folks to, your eye can focus close on the pintail and then focus further on the background, and you see it almost as a continuous view. That would never show up in a photograph. You'd never have that depth. And so what he's done is actually, this plate is probably 6 or 8 background pictures upon which the birds are superimposed to keep it all in sharp focus as your eye would see. An amazing amount of work, but a really useful thing. And once in a while, he'll throw a ringer in and put a duck or put a bird in the background that's not the one you're looking at, to challenge you to identify it as not a pintail or not a purple finch or something else. So it's really good. I recommend this as a reference. As I say, it's not something you want to take into the field in your pocket or carry it very far, but leaving it in the car and coming back to it, as I will do, makes a lot of use. So these are the Crossley guides, and I know you can get some of them. I don't know about all of them, definitely online, but also I think Blackwater sells. One other caution for those of you who are starting new, the idea of, well, one book cuts all, so why don't I just get a U.S. bird guide that covers all the species east and west? That's 600 and some species. Very confusing. There's a lot of warblers out west that you won't see here in the east very often, and it goes on and on. So I recommend, if you're going to buy a bird guide other than the waterfowl one, from Crossley or anyone else, get the ones for the east, and then you can always, if you go out west regularly or whatever, you can always get the additional other volume as well. It's a lot less confusing and helps you learn the birds that are common to your neck of the woods. All right, so if we go into some of the principles of bird identification, we'll compare for a minute or two, just as for trial, 2 waterfowl, the pintail and the canvasback. Field marks, if Peterson were to draw them, would be probably the red head of the canvasback, the brownish head with a white line up the back of it for the pintail. He would probably point out the tail, pintail being well named. He might point out the, which is visible at a great distance, the Roman nose or sloping nose of the canvasback, a pretty unique profile for ducks around. The canvasback back is old-time canvas. Canvas used to be quite white and bleached, so this is where the name came from. The pintail does not have that. But there's more to it than that, and something I try to stress is what is called general impression, size, and shape, or GIS. This is a term that was actually founded in the Second World War when people were watching for the flights over of enemy or friendly planes late in the day or at night, and they learned to identify them not by any particular markings on them, but by the general impression they get. The size of them, the shape, general impression might include noise. And it includes things like the profile. So a GIS feature of the canvasback would be that nose. Also the behavior. We'll learn a minute about babbling versus diving ducks. Does the duck tip up, or does it go underwater for longer periods of time? And where it's found. Most of canvasbacks are found in open water on Chesapeake Bay. They seldom be found in a small pond or a farm. Whereas pintail, on the other hand, like nice reedy, grassy, flooded ponds, flooded fields, and sometimes they're very abundant. Habitat is always a clue. When we go to the coast, we'll be seeing different kinds of ducks on some of the development ponds that we would see in the Ocean Sea inlet. All of that helps you get a quickie fix on narrowing an unknown bird down to a few possibilities. And as I say, sometimes behavior helps a lot. This is the way I see a lot of pintails. And again, especially if you're birding with binoculars and looking at waterfowl, your views may be pretty distant. In this case, the general impression and the shape of the bird and where it's found become very useful clues. It gets to the point where you can barely see the head cover, especially if conditions aren't right or if you're getting a windy day and it's hard to hold things up. And if it's foggy, it's even worse. So this is where Crossley comes in and basically says, these are views that you might actually really see, as opposed to the stuff that Peterson painted in his early books. For example, I was down at Blackwater. I usually do a New Year's Day celebration and go to Blackwater or somewhere. And this is a picture that I took of some feeding ducks. And I could tell right away what they were, and you will be able to as well. In fact, you're likely to see a scene very similar to this at Blackwater. And when a few come up to the surface, maybe you can also make out the other features of the northern pintail. But the butt end of the pintail with that pointy tail and that black area at the base is pretty characteristic, and a lot of pintails feed this. Okay. Let's go to eBird. One of the things that I'll be doing, and perhaps you will be too if you're interested in going this way. This is not a local duck. This is actually a torrent duck from the Andes Mountains. eBird often puts these up on the splash screen. Sometimes the birds are familiar, sometimes they're not. But eBird is the largest, has become in the first decade plus of its existence, the largest database of for birds of any kind of living animal in its natural state in the world. It's a huge database. Many millions now of submittals have been made and it's truly international. It goes all over the world, including very small countries you wouldn't think of. Qatar and others contribute to it as well. It's maintained by some kind of huge cloud-based resource at the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and you enter your data into this, and the data immediately becomes available to those who are doing research, such as those who did that third bird decline paper in 2019. Just basics, because this is not a course on eBird, but I'll be using it in the field. But we'll go to the website in a minute to look at the fundamental, if you will, components of it. But I will have a tablet with me, and I'll be putting our birds observations in there and submitting them to eBird, and that's from there I'll get the summary of where we've been and what we've done. The other resource that I never taught much about, but lots of people who've taken the course have found out about it, snuck in on me, and this is the resource called Merlin, which is an app for both Android and iPhones. It's free. You can get it from Cornell. If you go to the Cornell website, you'll be able to find out how to download it. It comes from either the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, but it is free. You put it on your phone, and Merlin will enable you to not only look at birds, see them, and play their songs, but for those who do this, you can hold up your phone and you can get the bird will sing for a singing bird, and it'll attempt to identify it. It also has a way of, I think it's in 4 or 5 steps. You can take an unknown bird, put in its characteristics, and it'll attempt to narrow it down, perhaps to a given species. Those are great crutches. I'm not wild about it. I like my personal bit is to get to see the whole bird. And so that whole bird includes where it is and what it's doing, as well as field marks to get identification.
Sometimes though, that's a very handy thing for learning what you're hearing.
That's right.
And then you can, that's part of identification.
That's right. And there are times when I hear bird song and I can't identify either. I don't have Merlin on my phone. I have it on my tablet, but I have it in a different way that, as you see, we get into the field. But yes, it is. I've also heard of people that set out their phone and turn them on and leave them out by their feeders. Merlin will tell them what's showing up there. I will point out to you that especially for song, that's a pretty complicated thing. Merlin's doing its best. But if you were to submit eBird data and said, I identified this unusual bird using Merlin, they won't accept it. They'll leave your record alone. They won't do a thing with it, but they won't incorporate it into the large database that scientists use. In other words, it's not confirmed. There may be a day when that might be different, but I have some doubts about that.
AI.
So yes, AI may help. But for the most part, if you're identifying a bird by using Merlin, which might say, oh, there's a kinglet over here, and I can't hear it. So there's a kinglet over here, then you can go look for it. And if you see it, then you can confirm. So Merlin is useful to break the ice, but it may not be the end all. And certainly if you're doing a life list, I wouldn't do a life list.
I just read a fiction book, but that had a lot of nature writing and the acknowledgements of that, the acknowledgement.
There you go. I may be fighting an uphill battle. But when we're in the field, you will see how my eBird records link to neural information. And I'll be using that to show you pictures and even play sounds. Birds and waterfowl don't make too much noise, but we'll see.
Hey, Wayne, one thing that I find really helpful is when you send out the notes on the bird count, because that gives me an idea of what I'm looking for. And it might be good to send that out to your class too.
Yeah, and we'll do that. I always do a trip report at the end with hints on how to identify the species we saw. And since we're dealing with waterfowl, it's very likely that we'll see the same species again on another trip. So the Oakley Street thing is a nice introduction, but almost all of those ducks we'll see elsewhere as well, and you'll get much more familiar with being able to identify under more trying conditions. There's only 5 or 6 species you'll see on Oakley Street. You may pick up some more of the waterfowl. So you'll get to know those pretty well. Going on, any questions, by the way?
I have a
Yes.
question, and not being new to all of this. The waterfowl names, getting to know the names of waterfowl. Is there any general rule that could be applied, such as like the pintail duck is named that appropriately because of physical attributes? Is there any general rule of why they're named to certain things, the physical attribute or the behavior, or just, is there any common denominator on all that, or they're just named?
Wouldn't it be nice? But maybe you've heard that, in fact, we're taking all the human names off of birds, and we're going to be identifying them by other names, alternate names, many of which I'm sure will be descriptive. For example, one bird, there have been a couple of changes that have been made. There used to be a duck called the old swan, which hunters use. It is now called the long-tailed duck, which is helpful to you, although that name might sound like a pintail. You get to see it.
Sometimes it's hard just when you get your birding book, because it'll be segmented by gambling ducks and then this type of bird and this type of bird. And may not be the way you're ready to think.
Yeah, it's the answer is there's no simple resource in that regard. A lot of waterfowl were named by hunters. And although we've gotten rid of names like blackhead for Scott and so on, you still hear that. And some of those names actually derive. The widgeon used to be called bald pig. It has this white, like a bald head. And sometimes those are nice and descriptive names. Sometimes they were a little bit near the bone. But there is no simple.
There's no room.
Yeah, it might get better, especially for a novice. It might get better as we start to change the names of some of these other birds. Townsend's warbler, Audubon's warbler, things like that, because these were acknowledged slave owners or other things, and they're trying to get politically correct and changing their names. And they'll probably use fairly descriptive. I was just in Peru, and a lot of those birds down there, which are really, in some ways, only been known for the last 100 years, all have fairly descriptive. Some of them, like the wood star, is a little hummingbird, and it's just like a wood star. And others like that crimson collar this, so we'll probably be seeing more of that. It won't be, it's not quick. They're studying it now. So that's a really good question. I never really thought of it. Yeah.
Just trying to define some logic to it, but it doesn't seem like there
and there isn't. And beginning to get familiar with the names is part of being able to identify. So that's just going to be part of the learning curve. There are 2 big classes of ducks. And we'll focus on that for the next little bit here. The dabblers and the non-dabblers. with a couple of exceptions. So here we've got a mallard in the middle of the upper bit, that's a gadwall. Pintail, you've seen that before. There's the widgeon, the former bald-pate. These are all drakes, ducks. Male ducks are called drakes, females are called hens. And the northern shoveler, which actually has a greenish tail, it doesn't show up in the light of this picture. Those are the dabblers. The dabbling ducks have a couple of other features. One is that they feed generally by tipping up and not leaving the surface of the water. So those pintails that I showed you are actually reaching down as far as they can, with their necks, to reach material on the bottom, often decaying grasses. And they're particularly common in freshwater habitats and some nearshore saltwater habitats, particularly if there's a lot of grass around that they can reach by tipping up. They can dive a little, but they don't dive for extended periods of time, and in general, they prefer not to. Once in a while, if it's the only way they can get food, they'll go down, but they won't stay under very long. Their legs are a little bit further forward than the other ducks I'm going to talk about, which enables them to walk more easily on land. And so they do waddle, but they do progress fairly well, sort of like barnyard ducks do. When you surprise them wherever they are, they tend to frequent smaller bodies of water or ponds. When you surprise them, they can jump into the air and take off without running along the surface. They slap their wings on the water, pushes them up, and they take off straight. And that's quite characteristic. Here's two more. These are small dabblers called teal. We may see green-winged teal as part of the course. The blue wings tend to come through here kind of later in the spring, so we'll see about that. And those are not pictures I took. The other ones are the diving ducks, sometimes also called sea ducks. By the way, dabbling ducks are also called puddle ducks. Puddle ducks, which helps sometimes tell where they tend to occur. Diving ducks include, this is the redhead. It used to be really abundant in Chesapeake. We're lucky to catch one at Oakley Street. There's our surf scoter again. This is the lesser scaup. There are two scaup species. They look a lot alike. We'll learn to try to separate them when we go to Oakley Street in particular. These used to be called blackheads by the hunters because the head is very dark. And old Roman nose are famous canvasback. These are not the only ones, but these are just selections from them. Diving ducks, for the most part, are a little bit more elongate. Their legs are further back on the body, which gives them the capability of swimming underwater fairly well. So when they dive, and they do regularly, they don't tip up very often. When they dive, they go down, they can reach vegetation and small clams and snails and other things on the bottom in the mud. They can scoop it up and they can stay under for many seconds, if not minutes at a time. Sometimes popping up in places that are different from where they went down. Kind of frustrating when they're feeding actively because you see it, you put your binoculars up, you're still on it, it's gone, and you see ripples on the surface if you're lucky. Because their legs are further back and just because of their general body construction, they can't leave the water in one jump. They have to run along the surface and gain momentum, and then they can take off. So if you surprise them wherever they are, and it's more open water, more near shore, deeper water, when you surprise them, off they'll go flying away. We'll see both examples down at Oakley Street and probably both kinds of behaviors as well. Since at Oakley Street people throw corn into the water there, some of the dabbling ducks do more than dabble. They don't stay down long. So those are the two big classes, and one of the first things that you'd ask if you're looking at waterfowl or visiting a wildlife refuge or whatever, and you see some ducks, is to ask which class they might belong to. That helps narrow down what might be 20 species to half that, if not more. Okay, that's the end of that particular bit. So now we're going to try to go online. And I may have to share screens to do that, but we'll figure out how to do it if we can. Okay, share screen. I want to go to, that's Cornell, but that'll work. I can go back. Share. All right, I'm gonna go back to eBird. So what I want to do here is to,
In your tab.
yeah, it might actually be here. Here it is. So here's the eBird tab. And this is what that screen looks like. When you go to the eBird, it's www.ebird.org. Move that up. Here you go. There it is. There it is. This is, as I say, eBird picks different species. They had the torrent duck in the example I was showing you. Now they've got Allen's hummingbird, which is a western species. Beautiful picture though. And if you go into it, the idea is the basic unit of eBird, which is what I want to show you. So I'm going to sign into my account. Setting up an eBird account is totally free. You do get a few email appeals from Cornell now and again. They're not too bad, but it's totally free, and it'll do things for you as an enticement to get you to contribute. The basic unit is the checklist. But if you'll notice over here, this is my personal account. This tells me how many bird species I've seen in the United States since I started using eBird. I actually cast back to some early stuff, even in my middle school days. When I first started birding, I found some historic records that were written in Peterson Field Guide, so I put them in as well. So my life list in the United States is 616 species.
So if anyone's new at this, you can get an app for Cornell on your phone.
That's right. Which is the one that I use on my tablet. And if you're on your phone, you can actually stay connected to the internet and submit everything you want. I don't have that kind of arrangement, so basically can enter this stuff, but then I have to go home and submit it, which to me is fine. But there is an eBird app also, just like Merlin. Okay, so there's my life list right there, and I can actually click on that and get the whole list of all the species I've seen, organized by any kind of way I want, like latest seen. Well, let's do it just for fun. It's the kind of stuff that you can get. There's my life list, and the last bird I saw was in 2021. On that list, it was a northern lapwing that appeared in a pond on Route 309 up near Centerville. And I can go there and actually see the checklist where I saw that bird, and I can go on down. I can also sort these by locations, by dates, by oldest first if I wanted to, all kinds of stuff. Okay.
And it puts location, right?
Right.
Yeah, because you entered that in.
Yes, you enter it in, and actually it does it in a sense for you, if you're lucky. Okay, come back to my eBird. So I have that. It also gives me my yearly totals. So here's how I'm progressing now in 2024. I can compare that to how I progressed at the same date in 2023. I don't know how interesting that is to people, but I can do all of this thing. I can also look at my list for January. And if I click on these things, I can see the birds that I've done. It also has a life list for all the states. Any new birds I've seen in any of these states are up there. So Maryland's leading. I wonder why. At 316, but Texas is up, not a distant, but second. Lots of birds down there from a couple of trips that I took there. Delaware's catching up. Yeah. Delaware's catching up. And here are my latest checklists, and I can actually view now, eBird has the capability of listing them all. And there are 6,070 checklists. Actually, for North America, it's less than that. But,
5, 6, 7, 8. Dot.
okay. If I click on this checklist, this is the one I did this morning. I'm going to try to do one a day this year. Let's see if I can make it. Vietnam will be a challenge. And if I check on that list, here are the birds that I observed this morning while walking the dog and checking my feeders out over 40 minutes. This is the route that I took. This with my tablet. This is how long I took. This is how far I went. And here are the 19 species. And if I click on one of those species, let's just take mourning doe, it'll link me to basically the resource that's Merlin with the information about the bird, its picture. I can even listen to its call or whatever I do. So particularly if it's an unusual bird, I often do that. When I'm teaching with you all, as I enter a checklist, if I see a bird that I want to show you up close on a photograph like this, I will take out my tablet go to the bird as I've entered it, and it will link over to the Merlin source, and it will show you a nice picture of it. Actually, several views, and we can even play the call.
I was
Right
gonna
in the
say,
field.
would you could listen to it?
You want to listen to that? Yes, the doves are pretty rife right now. If I go back to that, if I go back to the checklist itself,
How do you exactly, do you enter the,
I'll show
if
you.
you saw a bird flying around here or something?
Okay, I'll show you that. There's the checklist again. I had 15 morning doves this morning. I had up to 30 or 40 when the snow was falling. What you do, and I will demonstrate this better in the field, but basically it has a submit button, and that gives you a list of birds, and you can type in a short of a name, like say goldfinch. If you just typed in GOLD, goldfinch will come up as an option. Click on goldfinch and then put in the number again. And if you're using the phone app or tablet app, it will track you as to where you are. And the idea for a checklist is usually to try to spend less than an hour on a given checklist. And usually less, if you're driving or something, less than 5 miles. Often it's only a few hundred yards. In this case, it was 0.6 miles for me to walk the dog down to the mailbox, back, and walk around the yard. All of that is done mostly automatically. It's very easy, and I will demonstrate it when we go to Aubrey Street. Be glad to show you.
So, so you need to have, in order for it to know where you are, I mean, like if you have a phone signal or?
Yeah, your phone will have a GPS in it. And I'm not even online. My tablet, I don't have it here, but my tablet actually tells you where you are.
Is it automatically figuring out the birds, or you're having to sort of check?
You have to, yeah.
Comes the list.
But I will,
You might be on
hermit thrush, okay. Now, understand that,
You know, but it just.
that for a hermit thrush,
Yeah, but I know.
here you can see photographs of it. This is what will come up when I'm in the field too. You can see hermit thrush as well as wood thrushes, or tawnier on the tail. And here's the song. It's not singing this time. Arguably one of the prettiest birds on North America.
Where you are.
What I heard, and we'll see those in the field, so you'll have a chance to see. Okay. But anyway, it's easy to enter a checklist. A checklist basically is one little session of birding. If you move significantly to another place, you may want to start a new checklist. You can do that. You just close the one that you're doing. You can do that again. And you can get a report at the end of the day if you have more than one checklist of all the birds you've seen, all lumped together. And everything you enter goes to your life list. So if you see a brand new bird that you've never seen before, or if you're new to eBird, all of those go in and your life list grows accordingly. That's one of the carrots that they give you to get you to enter data that's available to the science community.
So these pictures are from Merlin.
These pictures basically are the same base as Merlin. They come from the Macaulay Library of Cornell. Yeah. And again, it's better. I like to do a lot of the teaching in the field, so it's better when I show you, and we'll have plenty of time in the street to do that. So I'll demonstrate that to you, and then later on you'll see how I summarize that in the report for our trip. So that's basically eBird, and then I can just sign out. If I want to, you can stay signed in, you know, you wish. And then I'm going to close that particular here. And let's see, what we got? We've got about 10 minutes, so let's go on with this. I've showed you what eBird does. Again, the species are linked to the Merlin source so that you can see pictures, get sounds, and look even at range maps if you have the app on your phone or on a tablet. Or you can use your computer at home and do the same thing, which is what I'm doing here. Okay, there are other waterfowl to look for, and so what I'm doing now is going to the Cornell Laboratory website, which you can Google. If you go to All About Birds, which is what the website allows you to link to, by the way, it also has a link to go to the Merlin site, so you can go there as well. We're one step in. I'm at All About Birds. And we go to BirdIg. See, there's Merlin, there's your link for the downloads. Okay. We can also do search, which is what I'm going to do to show you a couple of waterfowl. These don't fit into the two duck categories. So let's talk quickly about swans. Our local swan, which we'll see in abundance at Blackwater, is the tundra swan. Used to be called whistling swan, with a better name. But we live with it. These are birds that you may hear flying overhead. Just one. But if we listen to the sound, this is what happens if you get a flock coming over. Late fall, early winter, or winter, we get a few on our Christmas bird count. Waterfowl are arriving. I think global warming is causing them to arrive later in the fall because the habitats up north are frozen in. Great Lakes were not frozen at Christmas. I think they're seasoned up now, and that'll push these birds down. In the spring, in April, you may see the flocks flying north overhead, nice high V's. They tend to fly quite high. There are other swans as well, but that's the one that we're concerned with, so we'll just leave it at that. Then we have the geese. And we'll see several species here. Of course, our most common one is this one, Canada goose. Not Canadian. I'm not sure whether Canadians like that or not, but it's not the Canadian goose. It also occurs in Europe. It's Canada goose. It has that white throat patch. It's very distinctive. I think most of you are familiar with it. Probably many of you have neighbors or have fields near your homes that are loaded with some. Also in the tributaries to the bay. And right now they're being hunted. So you may have some flying over, fewer than you had the day.
So you have a story about the difference between the ones who stay here and the ones who migrate.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. There are resident Canada geese here. They tend to be bigger because they were brought in by hunt clubs when Canada geese did not winter here very well. When we switched to corn-based agriculture, there was a lot more forage for them in the fields, and they began to increase here in the 50s and 60s. But prior to that, they were actually imported. And those birds, some of which were wounded, some of which just for whatever reason stayed here, were brought in by hunt clubs. They usually pick the biggest ones, brought in from the west. And they have multiplied like mad because they're not hunted on golf courses. And the result has been a resident population. And you can see them out here by the restaurants, Oxford Road, the restaurants on Route 50 come about June. You'll see goslings walking around directing traffic. And they're breeding here as well.
Do they
The ones-
fly lower?
Pardon?
Do they fly lower than ones that are migrating?
Yes and no. Resident geese don't migrate much, so they will coalesce into flocks and groups in the late summer. And you're right, they tend not to fly high because they just fly from one place to the other. The migrant geese that come in later in the fall and who leave in the spring, when we see them, typically are flying high in a big V formation, sometimes several hundred birds together, heading north or south, and they fly higher, they're also smaller. But they can fly low in the winter when they're just moving around, heading from one field to another, or from a field to open water for open lake, things like that.
Somebody told me once that the reason that the resident geese don't take off and go someplace else is because they were never taught that. Is that true? Or is it because it's just easier to get food here?
Both. Probably more the latter. Birds tend to go where there's growth and where they can get it easily. So that also tends to get them here. And the other bit is they're not harassed as much. because they've learned that somebody's front yard or golf course or hospital grounds or whatever are safe.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of nice grass. They got nice fertilizer. They are problems in some areas, at least the poops are.
Yeah.
That's just cause problems. But it's interesting to note that they were not necessarily common in the Chesapeake region 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe longer. So those are geese, but there are other species as well. We're going to see snow geese. And hopefully we'll have them flying overhead and you'll be able to tell the difference. There's a big bunch of them in the Choptank River. They used to be this year. We'll see if they're still there. They have a higher pitched call. There's a race of Canada geese that have now been made into a separate species called the cackling goose. It's smaller. And it's a challenge to try to pick one out of the flock. But if you see a goose that's not much bigger than a mallard flying with bigger birds, it's probably a cat. We have snow geese. They come in two color phases. Over on the coast, we'll have Grant and maybe some other geese. So we will see other types of geese probably in this course alone. If we go back to search, we have one group of ducks that I showed you a picture of one. Let's just show you the hooded merganser. This is the common merganser. Mergansers do not have a spatula bill of ducks. They have actually teeth in their bill, and they're used to, they're a diving type of duck that can dive underwater and capture fish. So they don't feed so much on the bottom form, but they feed on fish themselves. They tend to appear in the spring, maybe after this course is done, but they often migrate through, and you'll see them in places like Pickering Creek and some of the tributaries. There usually is a concentration at Blackwater, but it's a long look to see them. But they're very large ducks. If you're familiar with the common loon, they're bulky like that. It's a great big bird. Again, the serrated bill as opposed to the spatula ducks is helpful. Size and coloration is useful. The females are a little bit more of a challenge. They all have crests. And there's a common merganser and a red-breasted merganser, which we also should see. It looks like a bad hair day. In the female hooded merganser, it is much more of a pompadour, so better well coiffed. So we'll see what we can do with those. But that's another group of ducks. It is a kind of diving duck, but it's not usually considered a diving duck as far as families. Right? Those are the mergansers. And then we have one more. They're called the stiff tails. We have only one of them here. And that's the duddy duck. So there is a true ruddy duck in breeding plumage, and you can see why it's well named. So here's one that's useful. Problem is, in the wintertime, it doesn't look like that. It does, typically, the drakes have the white teeth. It often has its tail cocked up from the water, although not always. But if you see a bunch of them, often when they're resting, the tail will be up. Here's the female showing you that the tail is down. That's not just because she's a female. In fact, she can cock it up as well. They typically, females have on the white cheek a darker line. The only other stiff tail in North America is the masked duck, which occurs in southern Texas. So we wouldn't have a confusion with this.
Do they raise their tail as a sign of being alerting others?
Probably, in this case, being the drake is in breeding plumage, it's probably a display. But in the wintertime, I don't know for sure why. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's a matter of being alert and whether or not they're conveying any information about that. It was just an article in the Smithsonian that just ran across it today about why dogs wag their tails. We still don't know why, despite what we think they. And that's true for birds too. We tend to anthropomorphose a lot. This bird thinks this bird is doing that. And a lot of times we really have no idea. Why do birds, chickadees, mob owls? And we're trying to figure it out, but there's no convincing proof, any real theory about it.
Makes them feel powerful.
Yeah. But they do. We think they're alerting the whole neighborhood to the presence of a predator who can't surprise them. But that's still us. And thinking that way, and it's not necessarily, and I don't say it's not true, but let's just say it hasn't. we'll try to be science-based as best we can. There's a lot of bird behaviors that we're learning that we were, in a sense, kind of given the wrong directions by interpreting what we think they're thinking and doing. That's not the case. Anyway, ruddy ducks they're getting common down off Oakley Street. They usually do not come into the corn, so we have to go looking for them. But in time, when they might start migrating, particularly in the spring, they form huge what are called rafts, which are almost pure ruddy ducks, often have a few other species mixed in if you want to pick them out. But we're talking thousands off the Chesapeake Bay Environmental Center of the Horsehead Peninsula in Queen Anne's County. With the Bay Bridge in the background, you can see a raft of several thousand ruddy ducks in the springtime. George Radcliffe, one of my colleagues, and I on the Tank River saw a raft, and we estimated it was 5,000 plus. Huge amounts. Right now, they're in smaller groups for the most part. They'll start rafting up, and it's part of their staging behavior as they start to migrate. Why they do that, I don't. It could be safety in numbers, predators. Could be something else about exploiting available food, or it could be something we just don't. Anyway, it's a small duck about like that, and not a little personality associated with them, and we will see them in several locations during the course.
Their bills are interesting, they'll slow down, their bill not like around.
Yeah, but they're so small and the bill is so short that even though it has the Romanos effect, it's not quite as strong as it would be in a canvasback. And again, the size is a big deal here. This is a little guy. This is half the size of the canvasback. Yeah. And in breeding plumage, it's nicely blue, and that white cheek really shows up. The canvasback has an all dark head, in this case, rusty. We'll be looking at those kinds of differences because they're part of the gist. It's not just a field mark, but it's just part of the overall view. But size alone will help you with this. This is a small duck, even a little bit smaller than bufflehead, and that's not very big. And eventually you'll need to get familiar with them in terms of just their relative size. So these are the stiff tails. So we've looked at puddle ducks, we've looked at diving ducks. Puddle ducks are dabblers, diving ducks are sea ducks. We've looked at, among the ducks, we've looked at mergansers with the thin bill, and we've looked at the stiff tails. Those are the four major classes, and then we have the geese and swans. That's the array that we hope to see this year, and with a little bit of luck, we'll see most of them that are found in the east. Sometimes not the best looks, we'll all do our best. One of the whole precepts of the course is this is to teach you to be able to identify birds and get familiar with them. It's not to get big lists. So we'll take the time necessary to get everybody on a bird if we can, and give everybody a good look and talk a lot about what makes that bird the species that it is, and consider other things than just the looks, the habitat, where it is, what it's doing, and so on. By the end, you should get pretty familiar, at least with some birds that are fairly common here. And then I have to pick one bubble. Almost all the birds we're going to see, as far as waterfowl are concerned, are winter residents. They do not breed here. They're gone during the summertime. A couple of exceptions, mallards, black ducks, maybe hooded mergansers, but just a few. The rest of them head to the Canadian Shield and the prairie pothole region of the Dakotas and Saskatchewan. And that's where the conservation happens.
And then we'll take your class next year to learn again.
Pardon?
We'll take your class next year to relearn.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you won't have much time to practice in the summer, but maybe by March, well, most of the waterfowl now are in breeding or preliminary, but in breeding plumage. Waterfowl have one other little trick up their sleeve. In the late summer, even when some of them are starting to return, they go through a plumage called eclipse, in which the drakes look a lot like the females. And I had a heck of a time identifying some of them, especially in the distance. Fortunately, they molt and complete that molt by November, so we can see them again in glory. But that's a time of year. Fortunately, most of them aren't here. It helps them. Even a wood duck, which you think is so spectacular, doesn't look much like a wood duck during the eclipse period. Some of them can't even fly, so they're very reclusive and don't get out of the
So we're going to lose time here.
Yes, so this is it. We're gonna lose our online and everything else, but I think we covered everything I wanted to get introduced.
One last question.
Yes.
Which is, for a field book, what, that can fit in your pocket, what's your favorite to have on hand when you're out in the field?
Nowadays I use my tablet, so, because I have it around, around. But, it's almost personal choice, but the Peterson Eastern Guide is pretty good. And, that's what I would start with. There might be some others that are along those lines. I think Ken Kaufman has a pretty good one. But the Peterson Guide is probably for a succinct bit with small text. The maps are small on the bird page, but in the back, they're also referenced in the figures, so you can see the range maps. That's probably worth it, but it's not that. Okay, all right, well, thanks everyone, and see you on Monday morning, 8 o'clock at Sailwinds Park, and you will get an email.